Hey, this is Drew Stone from New York City, and you're listening to If I Ruled the World podcast. Let's get it on.
If I ruled the world, I love them, baby.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. If I Ruled the World podcast welcomes Ian Mcfarland. How are you, Ian?
What's going on, guys? How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Doing all right. Where are you right now? You're in Boston?
I am in Boston. I'm actually in my studio in a little part of Boston called Allston. It's kind of like the...
I've played there. I've played...
where did you play?
Oh, shit. What is that fucking bar? We were supposed to play with Hellmouth. O'Brien's, maybe?
Yeah, O'Brien's is about 600 feet from me.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so check this out. My band was supposed to play with Hellmouth, and it was I guess the day that it was like... do I want to say Ted Kennedy's funeral? Somebody's funeral. One of the Kennedy's funeral, and they couldn't make it.
Forget
it. Forget it, right? So I was like, cool, we'll play with no one.
Yeah, no, forget it. That just stops everything. It's like
Pretty
it's
much
the same thing when the Red Sox play. It's like we're so used to disruption with just anything that has to do with the city and its history that it's just part of everyday life here. Baseball, politics. Those
Sounds
two
like
type
hell.
things, they go hand in hand in Boston, so you kind of can't escape it growing up here, you know?
Yeah. So it's good to finally get to talk to you because you and I have been going back and forth for a while. The reason why we haven't been able to either get face-to-face or even get on the phone is because of your schedule being really, really busy with the Godfathers of Hardcore. And we want to talk to you about a lot of stuff, but I'd love to just start there with Godfathers of Hardcore. And I just have seen on your Instagram and everything, it just keeps being released in different places. And why don't you just catch us up to where it is right now all over the world?
Wow. Well, it's kind of just you saying that. Me sitting here, I have to take a moment to like just be in the moment, because I tend to live in the past or in the future, and I never really stay in the moment, which is not a really healthy thing. So I'm constantly with the film working on things for the future that I've done in the past, and the film I can give as of right now, the film is now out digitally. I think on iTunes it's in 45 countries. On Google it's in 30 plus. Vimeo on demand it's worldwide, and let me see. Vudu is the U.S. only. Google, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, the last one would be there's Vudu's U.S. only, and then Amazon is in U.S. and Germany. And then it's still playing on Showtime on their streaming service and on broadcast, and it is about to go to the UK, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England for a full broadcast and streaming deal as well.
Now, how does that rollout work? As far as like, do you have to hit certain goals for that rollout to keep going?
I don't think there's a real answer to that, man. I mean, every project I think has its own thing and its own. They call them like windows, releasing windows. And, I could have done this a million ways, but the thing that was most important to me was protecting it, owning it, and, not letting it, end up with a distributor that really didn't understand the hardcore punk rock culture. Yeah. Or, and it just sits on a shelf because they just don't know how to sell it. So the thing that was the most important to me when releasing this film, when I made the decision to self-distribute it and release it, it was a very big decision. But with talking with my team, we decided to do it that way. And it's I wouldn't suggest it for any filmmaker. It's not easy. It's extremely hard. It's a full-time job. But again, it's not just all me. I have a team of people that are really behind this film, and they all have a role. I have, throughout the film, I had 5 different attorneys. One who was really 2 that were on board the whole time. Others that came in throughout for different processes. I have an executive producer. I have a co-producer. I have a producer. And then, then everybody that worked on it as well. The same DP through the whole film, Same colorist, writer through the whole film. So it's a big group effort to put something like this together, because I didn't want to just do a film that was would only cater towards AF fans or hardcore fans. I wanted to do something that kind of maybe broke through the ceiling a little bit and was also palatable to the mainstream, but without disrupting or taking away from everybody that grew up in this type of music and really loves it and respects it.
Well, I think you hit a bullseye on that for sure, because watching it from my perspective, I'm like, I wanted to ask you, like, when did you realize that the actual story was Vinnie and Roger more than, let's say, the band? Because I feel like whatever you just said just now is a goal that you set, and I feel like you really hit a home run on that mark, because you can show it to, like, George and I were just talking about, like, George told me, like, this is a movie you could show to your parents, and I think they would enjoy it.
But also a hardcore kid like me who's precious about hardcore, it hits that mark too.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a lot of documentaries about hardcore, but I wouldn't be like, Dad, you got to check this out.
Well, I appreciate you guys saying that. I mean, to answer your question about when I came up with this, idea of Roger and Vinnie's, relationship being the focus of the film, before I even started it, to answer you, I actually, the whole film started many, many years ago, when, I just started talking with these guys and doing some projects with them. I had been friends with them for a bunch of years, but I'd never been doing any work with them. And then once I started doing more and more bands and music industry film work, I was on tour with AF, and we started talking about projects, and they said, you should do something with us. We've always wanted to do, CB's is going to close not long. We should do a DVD, so that was like the first project. And from that point on, I kind of started really seeing how AF worked as a band. And I've been around long enough that I've so many different members that have come in and out of that band.
Yeah.
That, I have personal relationships with all of them. And I've done a lot of projects with, a good number of them. So, when we decided that I wanted to do when I decided I wanted to do the film, I pitched the guys on doing something different, and they were kind of like didn't really know what to think of it, because Roger loves art. Roger really pays attention to the small details in life, and Vinnie just plows through. He's like a bulldozer. He's like a toy truck. Toy bulldozer. He just goes through life, and he's just like, yeah, I'm going. Yeah, this is fun, plowing through. And Roger's kind of the one that's off to the side going, you might want to take this road or take this road. Huh. So when I sat down and said to him, look, I want to do this film, they were like, okay, let's go for it. I said, but there's a couple things I want to talk to you about. And that's when I kind of told them that I wanted to make the focus them, and I didn't want to call it Agnostic Front, or anything like that. And they were like, what? And I was like, they're like, we're not that interested. Come on. And I'm like, no, I think you're wrong. I think that if we tell the story of you two and your friendship, that you're going to learn the story of Agnostic Front without me having to tell it. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. So then I told them, I said, well, from that point on, this is the way I want to do it. So if you're down with doing it with me, this is what I'm going to do. But you got to agree to that, because I'm not going to do a discography film. I'm not interested in that. And I also wanted to leave the door open for them for the future to be able to do that. And they were very, very cool about that. They were actually like, that's a really cool idea, And I was like, yeah, you could do a whole nother documentary on just like the AF history.
Right.
And everything. And I just wanted to, tell things that related to their story and their history, and pick out the things that I thought represented that the best.
It's an interesting choice too, because I think band members want to have themselves shown in all their glory. And I'm sure even for you, it's kind of maybe the easier choice to just like, hey, we're just going to do this great thing about AF, but to then choose to do it that way, the way that you did it is more of a risk. It's just like, well, what are we uncovering here? And we hope there's a story here, and it's just a deeper thing that came out of it that I knew some of it, but just seeing Vinnie and Roger like that, it was like, wow, this is a real thing beyond my own perception of what I've known all these years.
Yeah, and actually, the biggest thing for me was, what was it going to be like when, Roger sat down with me and talked about the questions that I wanted to ask him, because the questions I started out asking him had nothing to do with AF. Mm-hmm. I remember, like, I still have the sheet of questions that I started asking him on the first day. It was the first thing we did, actually. I start all my films and all my projects that I do when I can, I'm not allowed to, with audio only recordings. So but high end. So no different than if there was a camera and lights there. I just remove the camera and lights and I get really high end audio, so then I can use it later on. But it has a totally different tone. It has a different, people deliver lines differently. They sound more relaxed. It's more conversational. And I knew that I really wanted to have sections in the film that represented what I call like speaking portraits, which are like my little shorts. If you've seen any of the short films I've done, I did one on Jake Bannon. I did one on Dan Hardy,
Dan
Joe
Hardy.
Lausen. And those are all audio only recordings. And then just really cool, beautiful footage over the top to tell another story at the same time. So I wanted to take that methodology and sensibilities and apply it to a feature film, but not do it like, the Nirvana film where it's just all, audio recordings only. I wanted to kind of move them together. So my idea was to do these audio only recordings with the guys so that we would jump in and out of what was happening in the moment in real time, or a topic that was happening, and then all of a sudden we would slow it down and dive into their inner monologue. And then it would allow people to really feel and understand and become, invested in the characters that they were learning about as they watched the film. And also keeping in mind that there's people that don't even understand hardcore or punk rock, and they just think of, pink hair, green hair, tattoos, drugs, and violence, criminals, and that's like the perception from like a mainstream when they see people that we see every day in our culture. And I wanted to kind of just show, the truth of what everybody really is like in this culture. And Roger and Vinnie just happen to be really, really good ambassadors.
Yeah.
So much so. And another thing that I have to say about the film that I loved is the editing. I think the editing is immaculate.
Thank you.
Everything pieced together, coming from like, we're all songwriters, we're all musicians. I couldn't imagine, like, it just placed together very well. And within the first 10 minutes of the movie, what I think, when I think of, movie setups, something that hit me was when Roger said, if he were to stop Agnostic Front, he feels like he would be taking something away from Vinnie. And I thought that was like such a great way, like within the first 10 minutes, because I feel like that's like a common theme through the movie that kind of, I feel like it's in the background somewhere, Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much about the editing. I mean, I'm a career editor. I started my career as an editor, and I decided way long ago that if I could become a good editor, and feel confident about storytelling, then I could probably become a pretty good director. And so I followed that path. So I actually edited the whole film myself, which was not something, again, that I would suggest a filmmaker do on their own.
You can't see me right now, but I'm giving you a standing ovation.
It was insane to do. It was just, I'll answer the second half of your question, but just let me say real quick, like, for anybody that's a filmmaker, or anybody that's in media or audio mixing or does podcast, understand, what it takes to tell a story in a lot of amount of time, and and make it engaging and make it interesting for people. What was hard about this film as an edit, and something I'd never done before, is deciding the layers that I was going to stack and how they would roll out as they went. So my process would go, I have a big wall in one of my edit bays is just corkboard, and we had topics that we had talked about that we wanted to talk about in the film before we even started. So we outlined the whole film before I even started shooting on the wall. And we said, okay, this would be best case scenario. So let's just be mindful of everything on this wall as we're shooting. And we did, but as we did it, it started growing and then shrinking away and then growing. So we were honing in on it. But the hardest part of that was telling Roger and Vinnie's relationship, their story, then telling Agnostic Front's story, which we do from a point. Then we tell the New York hardcore, story to a point. We tell Roger's relationship with his family, his dynamic, his history, his background. And then we tell Vinnie's story. And then all those layers to have them all work together and then come to a crescendo where there's something that's, normally you don't put in the third act and reveal. You usually put it up front and have people want to watch it to the end. Roger's heart condition was something I put up at the end, which is traditionally not the way to do things like that. But I decided to put it in the end and go this route because it would be a lot more interesting. So yes, it was a very, very difficult edit for me personally, and also just the time because, I was self-funded. I had a dead Kickstarter that, I'm very grateful for those people helping me, but that was not the budget for the film. Yeah, it wasn't even it wasn't even it was a portion of it, but this is a major endeavor. So, the amount of time that I would spend, I would do a commercial project, and then instead of normally taking another one and then another one, I would say, okay, I got one down. I got enough money for the next, 2 months. Right. I'm going to only work on the film. And then I would schedule out 2 months, and I would work 5, 6, 7 days a week at times, 15 hours a day. Just everything from digitizing, going through footage to going through old archival stuff to, reading transcripts of interviews. My hand was in every piece of this film. Yeah. So yeah, it was a very difficult thing to edit. But I feel that I learned so much as a filmmaker making this thing and as an editor, that I don't know, I probably will do it again. I say, I just want to break from it, but yeah, I love editing. So, I love being in a room by myself and my subjects, but the flip side of doing something like that is, you don't get a break. It's always in your head. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like a song.
It's just like a song. It's overwhelming because what I found in doing this film in particular, it's never happened to me before, is I was so entrenched in these guys, stories in their lives that I felt like I was taking on some of their pain by, hearing their stories, because there's a lot of things I didn't put in the film that are just really, really like just tragic things that have happened to these guys. It's just human beings, not in the band. Yeah. And, Roger talks about extensively and some stuff, and it's just a lot. And to hear that day in, day in, day out, over and over again, you can't help but have it affect you. And, there was times in making this movie that, I would just be in a horrible place mentally. Because, I would go home and my wife would, just say like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm trying to work out this scene. And she's like, well, tell me about it. And I tell her, and then I would say it out loud, and she's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm hearing day in and day out for the last 3 days, nonstop. And it's only a 2-minute scene. But it's literally what I'm hearing. And it's like, you're hearing pain over and over again. Right. So I would dread those moments, but you have to go through moments like that when you want to make something that really is meaningful. And I think by me going through and doing all those motions with this film and this story, I think that it helped audience members connect with Roger and Vinnie's story that much more.
Yeah. Absolutely, and like you said in the beginning, like all the distribution, like that language is like worldwide for sure. And I think you really nailed it. And it's funny too, like you invested so much time on something that we're passionate about. Like I could make a documentary on Sam I Am or Superchunk, but at the end of the day, like somewhere in my head, I might be thinking like, wow, maybe I should have done Metallica. You know, like at any point,
who I would love to do, by the way, if anybody in Metallica's camp is listening, I would
listen.
I would
Lars
drop
is our next
anything
guest.
to do that. I would drop anything to do Rob Halford or anybody Metallica, anybody in Metallica. So go on. I'm sorry.
No, that's true. I actually, to side note, that was actually one of my questions. Was in the land of Bohemian Rhapsody, The Dirt. I was just curious if there were any stories out there that you feel were good enough to tell, or something that you feel like you could do documentary wise, or even like an episodic type thing. What'd you think of The Dirt?
I have not watched The Dirt, and
He's been busy
I'll be
working,
honest
Sam.
with you, I don't want to watch it. I actually really like Motley Crue.
Okay.
And I've heard so much bad shit about it, and I don't want to watch it because I'm so worried about it really turning me off. From what I've seen pieces of it, and it's something that I think is I would have rather seen a documentary, put it that way.
Okay.
I would have rather seen a documentary. I respect the filmmakers for doing it and Motley Crue for putting themselves out there, as well as everybody invested in that project. But I don't know if I would have done that film. I just like the connection of seeing, the gateway into somebody's eyes when they're really, telling their heartfelt story themselves versus, seeing a depiction of it,
Retold.
Retold. It's like that. That's the other reason why I wanted to do this film so bad now, is because the way I wanted to do it could not be done later on. And I couldn't have done this film the way I did it if Roger and Vinnie weren't with us.
Right.
Or especially, if Roger wasn't with us, there's no way I could have. So that was also a really important thing to me to do, was do it. And I actually told those guys, I was like, I remember saying it to them. They both were kind of like, well, holy, get morbid on us here. And I was like, no, I was like, I'm being honest. Like, I want to do this film now while you're both still alive.
Right.
And I looked at Roger, and especially since you're still here, and that I think hit him. And him and I talked about it throughout the whole process of making it. And I was nervous. I was very nervous in this project with Roger. He's still here though, so I'm
nervous about him health wise.
Yeah, I was terrified. I was terrified as a friend. I consider him a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
But also as, the lead of my film. Like, Vinnie is a huge part of the film. He's I wouldn't even call him the co-star. It's about him and Roger, but Roger's story, it's the focus. And that's what gets us there and everything else. And, I had talks with Roger many times where, like, if you watch in the film where Roger says, it's the last scene and he's backstage. And I never asked him, but before at that night, before he was on and we were just kind of hanging out, I flew down just to get those couple shows, because I was so nervous that something was going to happen to him. And it was the first shows that he had played since he had his implant. And I told him, Roger, I'm really nervous. I said, are you sure you want to go through with this? I was like, I said, fuck the film, man. I was like, screw it. I was like, come on. I just want you to know, I don't want to push you to do this. And he's like, I was like, are you nervous? And he just looked at me. He's like, what do you think I am? I'm fucking terrified right now. And I'm like, well, don't do it. And he says, I got to do it. And he goes, it's today or tomorrow. It's got to be done at some point. He goes, I'm just going to have to do it. And I tell you, man, I mean, my nerves were on edge that whole afternoon, that whole day. I was just like, I even had a plan with my DP that in case something happened.
Yeah.
Like, I had a plan with the guys that if something happened, I hadn't even gone as far as talk to his family. If something happens, I was so worried about it. Because it was a real thing. It was very serious. And we downplay it in the film, but it was a super serious thing.
And I was going to say, what makes this great is, like every music scene needs documentarians. 20 years from now, people are going to be watching stuff like this. They're going to be watching everything that's being made. So, at the end of the day, I guess we're all going to go eventually. And to have something so well done, like his grandkids are going to watch it and all this other stuff. And it's a heavy thing for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll cut you off right there just to say one thing about that. Is I actually asked Roger before we started, the day of the first interview in his living room, I said, Roger, I've never asked you this, but I got to know before we start. I was like, why do you want to do this? Why are you willing to do this? And I want an honest answer. And I said, I'm not even going to record. I just want you to tell me 100% like why you want to do this, because I need to know. And he said, I want to do this for my kids.
Wow. And
I was like, I got choked up. I mean, I have kids. And I'm just like, wow, Jesus. Like, it just hit me so hard. I'm like, he really does, care about, putting himself out there. And he said, I want to do this for my kids. I want my kids are too young to understand right now. But someday they'll be able to understand, and they'll be able to see me talk about my story, and they'll be able to read my book. And that was just such a big moment for me in the process of this that I think it's going to stick with me forever.
And it's more than just looking at your musical legacy, which people think about, especially if you've been playing for many years, and what. The whole tone of the film, with Roger and Vinnie, it was interesting because I always think about Agnostic Front, unity, brotherhood, and you think of all these things in a certain context, and it always seems like celebratory and triumphant. And it's some of the things you remember from 20 years ago, but you forget about all the hard parts and you forget about the struggle. And when I saw them, it reminded me of a lot of that stuff. And you had done a film with the guy from Converge, and his was a little bit, and his was a little bit more of like, he was pretty open about his insecurities and, his struggles and growing up as a suburban kid and these different things. And like, we can relate to that. But when I saw Roger and Vinnie, it was just so much deeper as to like this longer struggle of like real poverty, of real struggles. And I know you left a lot out, but even though it's a film, you had to leave some of it out. I felt so much more of it, and it reminded me of things when I was younger in hardcore that I forgot about, because you just have these like memories of stuff, and it just opened up so much of that. I remember feeling like even choked up watching it.
Well, it's funny. It's like I remember when I finished the film. I've told this a bunch of times, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, but like Roger, I wouldn't show Roger and Vinnie anything until I finished it. Not anything. I wouldn't show him any scenes. I wouldn't show him any footage. I wouldn't show him anything. And Roger's a complete and utter control freak. And he always says now when he gets asked, he's like, well, I met my match when I met Ian. Because him and I have gotten in huge arguments over the stupidest things of just controlling a situation or controlling something. And, he didn't, I wouldn't allow him to see anything. And through the whole process, he was really getting, finally towards the end of the process, he was actually angry. And he was saying to me, this is bullshit. I need to see something. This isn't fair. You just spent the last few years, in our most intimate, places in our lives, in our house, and you're not even going to give me the courtesy to see anything. And I was like, you can't influence this, Roger. I'm sorry. I can't let you see this. Wow. And I was like, you got to trust me, man. Just wait. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I hope you will. And I told them early on, I said, if you guys like every part of this film, and it makes you feel great. I said, I've not done my job as a filmmaker, because it would be completely, catering to your egos. And so towards the end of the film, Roger he was getting pretty upset with me. And I ended up saying to him, well, look, finally I called him and I said, look, I got a rough cut ready. And he says, you do? And I said, yeah. And his tone changed. He was all excited. This was like a couple months later. And I said, so, we should schedule a time you come up. He goes, oh, okay, hold on. Let me call you right back. And he calls me back maybe 20 minutes later. And he said, okay, just pick me up at 9. And I said, what are you talking about? 9 when? He goes, in the morning. I said, what do you mean, tomorrow? And he says, yeah. I said, I can't do it tomorrow. And he says, no, you are. I bought a ticket. And I said, what do you fucking mean you bought a ticket? He's like, I'm coming to Boston. It's already done. Get ready. Cancel plans, what you got. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. So my buddy went and picked him up at the airport at 9 a.m. He walks into my studio, raring. He goes, just walks right in. And he says, I said, hey, man, you want to get breakfast? He's like, no. I said, you want to have coffee? Because he took a red eye. And I was like, do you want to have coffee, get some food? He goes, no. Let's watch it right now. I'm like, Roger, you haven't even put your bag down yet. And he's like, I want to see it now. And I'm like, okay, let me turn on the computer, which I haven't even done yet. I said, let me turn on the edit bay and turn on the lights. And I said, all right, give me a hug. And I said, this might be the last one. And he just kind of looks at me. He said, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? And I said, exactly the truth. You might not like this, and this might be the last time that I ever give you a hug or you give me a hug, man. I go, that's it. Wow. And he got really, really uncomfortable. And he came in and he watched the film, and it was really, really tough to watch it with him. Because, it's the last thing to do is watch a film with your subject. You just and he just, when Roger teared up in places and I could see him wiping tears off his eyes, I really was uncomfortable. But, I feel like I've been rambling and going off on a tangent.
No, his final thing.
Yeah, not at all.
So he did that, and his final thing after we watched the film, he just sat there looking at the black screen, and it was dead quiet in the room. There was just glowing on his face. I sneaked a couple pictures too. And his face is glowing from the computer screen in my bay. And he didn't even turn his head when I asked him this, but I said, so what do you think? And he wipes away the tears from his eyes and he goes, don't change anything. And then he stood up and walked out of the room. And he went down and used the bathroom, and he needed to be by himself for a few minutes, and he came back in. He's just like, I don't even know what to say. He goes, I need to go to my hotel. And he's like, I don't know what to say. And at that point, I still didn't even think I don't think he liked it. I thought he was like, he was like, wow. And it's a lot to watch something of your whole life.
It's heavy, man.
I think it was, it was heavy. I could never do that.
Yeah, to watch your life
in 90 minutes, in 96 minutes, like
the stuff with Nadia, his daughter, was like super heavy too.
Yeah, it's all really heavy stuff, and it's real stuff. The funny thing is, now that I had Roger watch it, Roger goes, "You got to get Vinny now. Vinny knows I'm here," and I was like, okay, let's do it. Vinny's gonna love it, and I said, okay, I'm going to set up a different situation for Vinny. I said, I'm going to make a party, and we're going to have a good time, and we're all going to laugh. Because Vinny loves watching footage of himself because he laughs at his own photos. So I had a couple friends come over. Brian from Death Row Dishonor came over. Craig, the guitarist, Craig Silverman, came up because he lives in Boston. He's a close friend of mine. And Mike Gallo came up, and I said, let's watch the film together, guys. And we had wine out, Vinny's favorite wine. We got like really great cigars. We ordered some pizza from a really nice place in town that does the kind of pizza Vinny would eat. And Vinny just, the whole time it was just laughter in there. But the funny thing is Vinny had to keep on getting up and going using the bathroom because he said it was hot in there. But as he's going, I could see his eyes really glassed over. Yeah. And he's macho, Italian, New York macho man. He says, I'm going to leave. I gotta use the bath. He couldn't let us see him like tearing up. And it was only at parts where it was hearing things about Roger, because the funny little factoid here is Roger and Vinny had never talked about Roger's upbringing And for the first time ever, Vinnie saw how Roger grew up.
Really? I mean, all those years touring, they never
talked about it.
Wow.
That's some real man shit right there.
It was that painful and I said, Vinnie, you didn't know that? And he goes, I never knew. We never talked about it. I was like, you didn't talk about the abuse Roger went through? And he goes, no, we always talked about other stuff. I said, bullshit. And he's like, no, he calls me E. He's like, I didn't know. I had no idea. He says, Jesus, he had a hard life, huh?
You think?
I'm like, I don't even know what to say to that.
That is incredible.
Isn't it crazy? Like the best friends, and they didn't talk about that stuff. They talk about everything else in life except Roger's childhood. And I think it's because Roger never talked about it.
Right.
And while I was filming Roger's interviews and talking about it, Roger would say things to me like, this is wild. He would call me a couple days later and he's like, hey man, I just thought of this thing. And he's like, because we talked about this the other day and I remembered this, and it would have no reason I would put something like that in the film, but he wanted to share it with me because he just wanted to give me context and more, understanding of his life. Because you got to realize too, he was also working on his book at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's right.
So imagine, think about that for a second. He's working on the film on his life and the book on his life. Why do you think he's doing that right now, right at that moment together?
For sure.
And his wife, Emily, is just the sweetest woman on the planet. And she one time when I went out there, she said, I think this is pretty, therapeutic for Roger in a weird way. She said, he's organized all his memorabilia. He's framed all of his records. He never did that before. It's always just sat in a closet. She's like, he's made photo albums, all these photos. I see him go into he has a record room in his house. He goes into this room and he just sits and listens to records all the time now and just reminisces. And I'm like, wow. And I asked him about it and he says, yeah, man, it's crazy. It's like going through all this stuff has made me have this I always love hardcore, but it's been part of my life for so long that maybe I didn't think about it that way anymore.
Yeah.
He goes, and in this talking about it and talking about all this stuff and how much I love the band and my history and all the hardships, he goes, it's just pushed me in this moment where I just want to reminisce and just think about all the good stuff. And I happen to think about the bad too. And he goes, but it's really done quite a number on me emotionally making this thing. Cause Roger was very involved in, expressing his story. And I respected that the most I could.
Yeah.
That is the best part about things like this, a documentary or even like a podcast is, when you talk about certain records that you haven't heard in a while, I feel like it's this cycle that keeps these things alive now, especially with podcasting. Yeah. I'll be listening to a podcast and they'll talk about the first Crowbar record and I'll be like, I haven't heard that in a while. I want to go listen. It's just these conversations just keep these movies. It's like, I want to go see One Crazy Summer right now, Yeah,
it's like you hear it's for me, if you hear a song, or I smell a smell, those two things trigger for me. If I smell a certain smell, it'll bring me back to a part of my life. I just remember things that way for some reason. Or if I hear a song, those two things spark memories like crazy.
Absolutely.
Immediately. When you said Crowbar, I remember the first tour I went on, and that album was actually stuck in the tape deck for 2.5 months.
Going back to the Roger thing, so you sat down with Vinnie and Roger at both separate times. That must have been nerve-wracking, but what was the first premiere like, and where was it?
Well, that's where I'm glad you brought that, because that's where I was trying to go when I asked that question, and then I got sidetracked. That was absolutely nerve-wracking because it was when I finished the film, I had to get a lot more money to make it legal, pay licenses, pay certain people that worked on it, legal, insurance, all this stuff that people don't think about when they make a film. I just put it off in the back of my mind. But when I got to the point where I got into a festival, it was a whole nother thing for me, because I didn't plan on when it was going to premiere. I just was trying to get it done. So once I submitted to some festivals and I got into the one that I actually had hoped to get into, it was in New York City. I was very excited, but I was really nervous because it was in New York City, and I knew what it would be like. so I, call Roger and Vinnie both. I say, guys, we got into the Doc NYC Film Festival. It's like a really prestigious film festival. It's, it's not like Sundance, but it's like, it's really well known and it's really respected. It's put on by Showtime, I think, HBO, History Channel, Discovery Channel, and Amazon. And, so it was nerve-wracking, but I told them the date, and they said, well, we can't go. So what do you mean you can't go? What do you mean you can't? And I was like, what do you mean you can't go to the premiere? Like, we're going to be on tour. And I said, no. You're playing England, and you have like 4 shows, and you can skip the first show. Cancel it. We're like fucking 2.5 months out. You can cancel it. They said, no way. We don't cancel shows. I said, you don't cancel shows for a goddamn premiere of a film about your life? I was like, I was pissed. I was like, you can't do this, guys. That's ridiculous. And they said, no. And I said, well, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do the premiere without you guys there. Yeah. Partially because I was very nervous on standing in front of a New York hardcore audience by myself, and if people didn't like it. Yeah. So it was beyond nerve-wracking. But then we talked about it, and actually Roger and Vinnie both said to me, both on the phone, because we had a call all 3 together, and they said we talked about it, we think you should do it. We don't need to be there. This is your film. This is not our film. You need to do this, and we'll see it another time. And I'm like, okay. So I accepted, and then it sold out in a couple days, which only escalated my anxiety. Yeah. But I made sure to invite people like Jimmy, G, and like Mike Judge, and like anybody that I that kind of showed up in the film, but also was OGs from like the original New York hardcore scene when it first started. Because I thought, okay, if those people like it and they dig it and they get behind it, maybe other people will follow suit. Or maybe they'll be able to be like, this sucks, and then I'll know immediately, and it won't be this thing that's lingering in the back of my mind forever.
It's a trial by fire with the people you're mentioning.
Yes. Yeah. So we, the film went off really great, and then Jimmy and Joe, cousin Joe, and like Mike Judge, and like, my God, there was so many New York hardcore guys there, and they literally, after the screening, and I did my question and answer, they were all gone. And I was like, oh, they fucking hated the film. Shit. And so I had an after party across the street. And I'm in there when it was a couple hundred people in there. Everybody came over, and I like emptied my bank account and like bought the bar for like an hour. Just so I was like, man, good move. I was like, maybe I can get everybody drunk. I was like, maybe I can get everybody drunk, or at least on their way. And then if they don't like it, maybe they'll at least get drunk and be happy and won't like, jump me. and I said, so they came, I'm in the room, and all of a sudden I see in single file line, one after another, and Jimmy at the head of the line. And Jimmy is looking right at me from about 40 feet away, and he's pushing through the crowd, like not a little bit. He's pushing through to get to me. Oh, jeez. And I was like, oh no, Jimmy, if you know Jimmy, he's the nicest guy on the planet.
We had him on.
Yeah, he's the nicest dude on the planet. I've known Jimmy for a very long time, but I know Jimmy well enough to know that Jimmy is Jimmy. He's a great dude, super nice, but Jesus, you do not want to piss that guy off. It's another world when he gets pissed. Yeah. And he's coming at me.
And you piss off one.
We better. It's just, that's what's going to happen. Yeah. So he's walking in, and no, they're not smiling. And I'm like, oh, they took offense to something. Here we go. And Jimmy walks in, he pushes through the crowd, he walks up to me, and he just looks at me, and he grabs my arms, and he gives me a hug, and he says, kid, you did it. And I was like, wow. And then he leans back, this is a true story, he leans back, and he grabs both hands, one on each side of my face, and he looks directly in my eyes, and he's got tears in his eyes, and he says, you have no idea what you've done. Wow. Thank you. And he gave me a kiss on the cheek. And then he goes, I just can't even believe this. And he just walked away, and he walked over on the other side of the bar. And then he kept on saying throughout and the other guy said the same thing. And I was like, it was so powerful that it just made me feel like a fucking rock star. Yeah. So it's like the people that I had hoped would like this film were embracing it. And I was like, man, I think I did something pretty cool. maybe people in the rest of the world will like it. And then it kind of just went from there. But that first night was so crazy nerve-wracking. And there was other times. I mean, I went to all these film festivals. We did I think about 20 film festivals. I was gone for about 70, 80 days on the road throughout 2018, just going to film festivals. And, I would do question and answers every single time, every single night. And sometimes Roger and Vinnie would come if they could, or Roger would go with me more. And he would do the question and answers with me. And it was a really cool experience for people to be in that room and watch a movie with Roger and Vinnie, and then be able to ask them questions about the film and their life. And I would just sit back and just watch and just be like, this is so cool. Like, to watch people go through this.
You finally get to see people getting, they're getting what you put out there. Like, it's like when you're in a band and you decide, we're going to do a different type of song, and people may or may not get it. You gotta do what you want to do artistically, of course, but it's always nicer when people get what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
To be misunderstood, I'm sure, is like a looming threat over this whole thing.
I always say to people, like, one of my sayings I always say is like, I would rather be hated than misunderstood. And, and it's just, I'm fine with somebody not liking me, fine. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Your loss. Go fuck yourself. But if misunderstandings are just a tragedy, and that's what was really worrisome. It's like somebody they misunderstood my intentions, or like my skill set, or like, just there's so many things as a filmmaker you go through, so many insecurities that you go through.
Especially in the scene we grew up in, intentions are important.
Very. And that's the thing is too. It's like I was more nervous about the scene accepting the film versus the mainstream. I would love the mainstream to accept it, but I've always accepted that they're never going to accept us or our music or the things we say, or all these things. They're never going to accept it. It's always going to be us against them, no matter what, because we're not mainstream. It's thinking for yourself. It's going against the grain and having different kind of, moral code, and not giving in to things that other people in mainstream society just are complicit to. And compliant, and that's what was nerve-wracking, because people in hardcore speak their mind, and they'll stand up and be like, that sucked. That sucked. You wasted my fucking money. Yeah,
and
I want my money back.
You're facing the fact that a lot of people kind of lean towards maybe automatically saying that it sucks.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a predisposition to maybe being a little bit more cynical, a little bit more negative. Call it what you will. Maybe it's a protective measure.
I like the rough cut better.
Yeah, I like the rough cut.
The rough cut was better. Yeah. Rough cut was better when it was all like, I like the demo, bro. Like,
so going from like those screenings, passing the baton to something that I think is super important. Showtime has been doing a lot of great content. You take Sasha Jenkins doing that fucking amazing Wu-Tang docuseries. Showtime also had the Suge Knight thing, also the Gigi Allen thing, and they picked you guys up too with Godfathers, and that had to have been huge.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say about that to this day. It still hasn't sunk in. It was I had a sales agent that my attorney decided to bring on. My attorney is also my executive producer. His name's Evan Krause. He actually just produced the new Apollo 11 movie, the big one that's in theaters and whatnot.
Nice.
And he's done a lot of different stuff over the years, and he's a veteran. And he was like, I really think, we need to get you a sales agent. He goes, we need to get this thing broadcast. I was like, you really think we can get this broadcast? He's like, I'm telling you, if we can get this thing on a big network, like a premium channel, like a Netflix or a HBO or a Showtime, it's going to add a level of credibility to this film and this scene that has never been seen before. And I was like, that's cool, but me being the pessimistic person I am, I said, yeah, right. I don't see a major network picking up a film about hardcore and agnostic front. It's just I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
So he says, well, I got an agent that I think can really do a great job. His name's David Pepernini from Cargo Releasing. And David watched the film, and he said, first thing he said when we had the first call, he goes, Showtime. He goes, I'm taking this right to Showtime. And I was like, you think they'll dig it? And he's like, well, we'll see. So he took it to them, and months went by, and he's also shopping at other places, and I'm getting frustrated, and I'm like, nobody's buying it, nobody wants it. I guess I do have to self-put it out. And then the next day, he sent me an email and said they are very interested in. And then a few months went by, and I wasn't allowed to tell anybody about this stuff. So people are starting to get anxious and be like, why is the film not out? Why am I not getting my Kickstarter? Why am, this, that, and that? And it was so deep in negotiations with Showtime that they said they wanted it to be a Showtime Presents, which is like really big deal. It's like, and I was just like, holy crap, are you kidding me? And I was just, it's like a dream. It's literally like winning the lottery, because that's something that people don't realize too, is how many films are out there and how many films get pitched. Most film festivals that we did had an average of 1,500 to 3,000 entries per year.
Jesus Christ.
And they only pick anywhere from 50 to 200 of those films to be in the film festival.
Yeah.
So once we start getting in all these film festivals, like, okay, we got something cool. It's starting to make us, we're getting asked to do all these film festivals. But it's a whole other monster when you take it to like a premium cable channel and then say, oh, that's too small of an audience because they're dealing with, give me a break. Like doing a film on Eric Clapton, which they did, and then Agnostic Front. Yeah, I can see it being something that would work. But at the same time, it's not going to hit the sales some like a print. The other films there was George Michael's film and Prince and Madonna. Mm-hmm. Those are the films on the queue, and I said we just don't have the reach, and these places just care about money. And my sales agent said no, not Showtime. They do care about money. They're a business. He goes, but their goal is to put out quality, well-made music documentaries. They want to put out really well-made documentaries and music films in particular. And he said they want your film, and we were like, holy shit. And we worked out the deal, and I couldn't be happier, to be honest with you.
That's incredible.
They were so supportive, and and right when the deal was done, I immediately could start talking to them, and we worked out like deliverables and like talking with them, and like, we want to do this. And then they were like, we're doing commercials. Like, you're doing commercials? My attorney was like, holy shit, they're doing commercials. It's like they're really going with this thing. So it got real then, and then right after that, my sales agent started talking with Sky Arts, Sky in England, and I just couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it.
Yeah.
So we did those, and then from there, then we just, I don't know, it just kept, a new thing just kept on happening all the time, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
We hit number 1 on iTunes music film for 2.5 weeks. That's insane to me. Like, I never would have thought that something like this would go that far. And I'm extremely grateful for it happening. Like, I feel good for me, and I feel good for the band, and I feel great from a scene that I've been part of since I was a kid. It's almost like, we have something that like broke through. Yeah, it broke through. And, and
it's unlikely. It was just an unlikely idea to break through.
Yeah.
When you watch the film and everything, you're like, oh yeah, I could see why. But to have the idea from the beginning and put that together and go through everything that you went through to, and your team, and everybody that was involved in this and the guys in the band, it's just like, it's just so unlikely.
Yeah.
And then to be picked up in the way that it is.
Well, you have no idea how many people would not give me money for this film. I asked for years for people to help support this film. Anybody I knew that had disposable income and was attached in one way, shape, or form to hardcore, I would ask them for money about making this film, and every single one of them turned me down and said, that's not going to sell. I'll never make my money back. And well, joke's on you.
You know, it's funny, just a quick thing about the Kickstarter is I donated way back in 2015.
Yep.
And I think I use like an email address that I don't really look at that much. Because every once in a while I'd be like, I wonder where my poster is, right? And just as you and I started to talk, I just like went back and searched an old email, and there's a couple of emails from you in like 2015, like, hey man, can you just update your Kickstarter so we can send you your reward? Because I was kind of like, when I first started to talk to you, I'm like, I'm going to bring up about that poster thing.
It's still, it's still happening. Like I just shipped out 10 this past week for people that never updated their shit. And it's crazy to me, but I can't thank you enough for supporting it. I can't thank people for supporting it because, they believed in what I did. It did help that I filmed something first and said, and cut something together going, this is what it's going to look like. Trust me. And that I don't think I would have done a good Kickstarter if I didn't do that video. Because people would have thought it was, just going to be a typical band film,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been an incredible journey so far.
Well,
we could keep going,
but I just wanted to ask you real quick, because we could talk about Godfathers of Hardcore all day.
Yeah.
But I saw the Freemasons thing on your site, and is that something new you're doing? And those are 3 teasers?
No, those are actually I do a lot of commercial work.
Okay.
Where I own a small boutique post company.
Okay.
And I direct a fair amount of commercials and branded content and documentary stuff. So that project was brought to me by an agency called Small Army in Boston, and the Freemasons of Massachusetts are one of their clients, and they pitched them. It was funny. They pitched them that whole series. And they used my Jacob Band and Rungs on a Ladder piece as the example of what they wanted to do.
Okay.
And then they contacted me after the fact and said, would you be interested in doing this? They really like your work and like our idea. And I said, sure. So I did it. But I'm not a Mason. My grandfather was. I have no connection to them other than I have a lot of friends that are Masons. But yeah, it was more of they're basically like, they're my speaking portrait style put in like an advertising medium.
Yeah, I was intrigued. I just didn't know if that was something. So what is next for you?
I'm actually working on a couple treatments right now. I hope to see a new one today from my copywriter. I would love to say what they are, but I'm really nervous to even say it out loud because the people that I'm pitching to don't necessarily really even fully know what I'm pitching. So I'm pitching. Put it this way: I'm pitching some things that will definitely be in the line of what I just did. They'll be music oriented.
So Rob Halford, basically.
Yeah, but they're not going to be punk rock or hardcore music. They're very, very well known household names. And that will be much, much bigger deal, but they have amazing stories and, something that can really, people that can relate with, especially with, our times and everything that's talked about in our times. But I really like sticking in the music category. I still do a lot of music. I don't do too many music videos. I do them for certain bands. I did
Czarface.
Did Czarface, yep. Did a couple for Czarface.
Is amazing. And that video, that video Air Out is like that's like the most cinematic one, so it makes sense that you did it. Fantastic. Love. I mean, I guess you must have some kind of relationship with Esoteric.
Yeah, we did. We did a couple videos with Esoteric, and that one was a pretty big deal to do that one because we spent the entire budget on the video.
It looks like it.
Yeah, we didn't make a dime. We just wanted to do something really cool, and we had some downtime. We're like, let's do something crazy. So we did. We called in every favor we could. But yeah, I've done a lot of work for music from everyone from Killswitch Engage to
Emmy nominated.
Yeah.
Yep, they're Grammy nominated a couple times. As They Lay Dying, same thing. Did Meshuggah. I did their big Bleed video. I did the Alive concert film.
We had Jessica Pimentel on the show.
Yeah,
and
I just hung out with her 2 weeks ago.
She is so cool.
Yeah, we hung out 2 weeks ago. She came up to Boston when Meshuggah played, and we've been, online friends and talked, text and stuff like that for a few years. Plus, I've kind of known her from bands, and when she opened up, her band used to open up for us a couple times at Castle Heights. And
Everybody Gets Hurt.
Yeah, Everybody Gets Hurt. I'll never forget that. And we have that connection. She's cool as hell. And,
great, huge music fan.
Very
sure.
grounded too. Totally. She's a representation of a very strong woman in my eyes, and very well put together. She's very beautiful. She's very, very put together. She's very talented, and she's just a nice person. So, I'd love to. Actually, I didn't know she was on the show. I'd love to hear that. To be honest.
Yeah, a few episodes. I think a few episodes ago, somewhere down the line.
Okay. And just one final point on that last thing that you were talking about. Your next thing you do, even though it's going to be music and documentary in a way, must be kind of nice that maybe you won't be as close to those people as you are to Roger and Vinnie, where you're going to feel that type of, like you were saying, feel the pain of it going home.
No,
with all this anxiety.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm a very empathetic person, and that's kind of one of the things that I wish I could turn off at times.
Yeah.
I don't know. My mother said it as a kid. My wife says it now. I feel things differently. I think, not that I'm some special person, but I just feel things, I think, more than some people. It's not the best trait in the world at times. But hopefully I can, I think, a friend of mine told me when I was talking to her about it, I was like, I don't know if I can, keep doing what I do, because I just end up getting so entrenched in these films and just feeling what is being put across so much. And she's like, no, that's what makes you, good at what you do. You really, you're invested in it. And like the same thing, I was having the same conversation with Adam D last weekend from Killswitch Engage. And he was talking to me about, they just finished recording an album, and I was like, how did it go for you? And he's like, well, he's like, it's good when you start dreaming it and thinking about it, and then you wake up and you work for 12 hours and you go to sleep, and then you wake up exhausted because you just dreamt about everything you did that day. Yeah. And that's, I think, allows you to do good work, and it's all part of the process of getting something good out there.
That's your stamp. I mean, that's how it comes out the way that it does. And if it came along easily, I mean, if you think of the amount of years that you've been involved in music and art, if it came along easily, it probably wouldn't be as good. And it's
and everybody would be doing it too.
It's just the truth. It's like when it's just an easy thing, I don't know why. It's just not as good. You know what I mean? Maybe you're phoning it in. So
you phone it in, exactly. Yeah. You phone it in. But when you feel every move you make, it allows you to become part of it. And there's a lot of me in this film, even though it's not my story. Just little things that I relate with, but I also edited them away that I can relate with even more. Mm-hmm. But they're still staying true to what Roger said, or Vinnie said. So I lied. There's two questions left, because I always have to ask, for someone like me, like I could watch a documentary on like anything, pretty much. What are some of the like the best documentaries that you've seen through your life? Like as far as like let's go with music, or if you want to go, anything in general. Give me like the top three that you feel really affected you to the point where you're like, this is something that I'd love to do. Okay. I can tell you the one that really kicked it off for me. There's a few, and they're classics, which was The Decline of Western Civilization. Okay. Changed my life completely. It was the first time I could see that, punk rock and hardcore music could be documented in an engaging and cool way. I was just mesmerized by that series when I was a kid, and even when it came out digitally, I honestly, I watch it regularly. I ripped off so much shit in that film. And the crazy thing is, I told Penelope Spheris, I ended up connecting with her, and she actually watched the rough cut for me. And I told her, I said, I've worked really hard to not rip you off and just being, influenced by you, but I ripped you off.
That's a
You'll see
big
where.
deal. She watched it, huh? That's a fucking
no,
awesome.
she watched it. It was pretty amazing to have her watch it. Another State of Mind was another one that really kind of stuck out to me. But films that have really deeply affected me, if I had to narrow it down to one, it was actually not an old one. It was a fairly new one that just threw me for a fucking loop.
Maybe we have the same one. Let's hear.
20,000 Days on Earth.
Oh.
Nick Cave. That film is so beautifully shot, so interesting, and so matter of fact, and so it's like his inner monologue the entire time, that it inspired me so much in so many ways. I love the film called Dark Star, which is H.R. Geiger's film. It follows him for the last, I think, year of his life.
Oh, wow.
And there's a couple crime documentaries that have really blown me away.
The 7.5?
The recent one. What's that?
The 7.5?
Blew me away.
Right?
Love that film. I've watched that like 5 times.
I just heard Michael Dad. I went back to Joe Rogan. He did like a 3-hour
it's
episode.
so good.
That was a good one.
It's so good, man. The Imposter changed me. If you haven't seen that,
I heard of it, yeah.
Produced by a guy named Simon Chin. Fascinating, crazy documentary. And then, there's been so many films that have influenced me, but ones that have really stuck out. I would have to say those. Some Kind of Monster blew me away. Still blows me away. I buy stuff on iTunes whenever I can.
Yeah.
And whenever I don't rent it, I'll say I'm fucking buying this, and just because I want to support the filmmakers and everybody that does it. But yeah, those ones really kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah.
But as far as films, and narrative films, there's a million that have really affected me. But if I had to say, there's been a couple things that have influenced me dramatically, and I felt the films, which was the one that really, the writing and the way that it laid out was The Wire.
Oh,
that series just
the best.
It's just a masterpiece. Every episode is a goddamn
even
masterpiece.
season 2.
Even season 2. Even season 2.
I like that they went back season 3, but yeah, that before Breaking Bad, The Wire was the one that I was like, the intricacies of that show. I have high hopes for City on a Hill. The first 2 episodes have been great, and it does remind me.
It ain't no Wire, man.
Yeah,
it is not no Wire, but it's good. I just got to finish watching Billions too, which I love.
Showtime.
Yeah, really great. And there's a lot of great films on Showtime. I'm not pumping Showtime, but
no, there's a lot of great shit on Showtime.
Yeah,
sure.
They happen to have a lot of great content lately. And my friends actually upstairs, 2 floors up from me, these guys called the Nash Brothers. They're twins. They just did the Edelman film, and that's on Showtime now. I think it comes out. Is today the 28th? It came out last night.
Awesome. I got to check that out.
Yeah.
What's it called again?
You should check. It's called 100% Edelman, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah. I don't know. I take inspiration in films and, documentaries and music and driving down the street. And a lot of things I do is I'll wear headphones and put soundtracks on, and I'll just go for a walk, and it changes your whole perspective on what's happening around you. It's nothing like listening to Cliff Martinez while you're walking through, downtown Boston and having people scream at each other, or or whatever it may be. But yeah,
we got one more for you.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, so the name of the podcast is If I Ruled the World Podcast, and we ask every guest that question. So we pose to you, Ian Mcfarland, if you ruled the world, what would that look like?
It would be a happier, more empathetic, honest, and consistent society.
Consistent.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were such an empath.
Awesome.
Sounds like the Ian McFarland I know.
Yeah.
I'll end it this. I live my life on a couple different ways. is it's called The Promise, and it was something my wife showed me a long time ago on a couple different principles. One is a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's comparison is the death of joy. When you start comparing yourself to everyone and everyone around you, you end up being very negative because you're saying, I'm not getting that. I don't get that too. Just be grateful for what you have and the people around you. And two, you know, everything for me is based on trust. And there's these 3 pillars that surround the trust: empathy, consistency, and authenticity. And when you break one of those for me, the trust is jeopardized. And I choose to be around people that are like-minded in those ideals. And otherwise, I'd rather I just don't have time, you know, the life's too short, and the world is too nasty of a place to be anything but empathetic. But at the same time, don't take shit.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well,
so there you go.
Thank you
Cool,
for
man.
doing this finally. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, man.
Guys, thank you so much for having me, and I'm a big fan of the podcast, and thanks for having me on, man. I can't wait.
Thanks, man.
Later.
We'll
All
keep
right,
you
man.
posted.
Talk to you soon.
If I ruled the world, I love 'em, baby.